Interested in the holiness message for the 21st century? Wondering what the future of Christian education is, including theological education? Are you also interested in a cutting-edge conversation on the use of AI? Well, I'm Brian Russell, and I'm the host of the Deep Dive Spirituality Conversations podcast. And today, speaking with my guest, Dr. Ken Schenck, I'm going to get into all of those topics and more in a real fun conversation for me. I first met Ken in 1992 when I was a student at Asbury Theological Seminary. Ken was somebody I looked up to. He was a teaching fellow, and I would go on to become a teaching fellow, and both of us used that opportunity as a springboard to a career in graduate level theological education. Now, Ken is a New Testament specialist, best known for his work on Hebrews. He did a PhD in New Testament studies before becoming a professor at Indiana Wesleyan University. He then went on to become founding dean, and he's held several deanships in his long career. And he also, for a season, worked at a significant leadership role at Houghton University before now taking his present position, working as the provost of a cutting-edge educational startup, Campus EDU, which has an audacious mission to provide excellent, outstanding online education in a way that serves millions of people around the world. Now, you're going to hear a little bit more about Campus, and Campus exists really to bolster existing schools with its cutting-edge approach to learning. So you're going to love this conversation. It was great for me to catch up with Ken. And before we jump into the interview, let me just remind you of a couple of things. All of the resources and links will be in the show notes. And I'd also be grateful if you would leave a review, click like, subscribe, share this with friends to help get the word out on the Deep Dive Spirituality Conversations podcast. If I can be of any service to you, I'd invite you to check out my website, brianrussellphd.com, or you can email me directly at brian@brianrussellphd.com. Now, let's get right to my conversation with Dr. Ken Schenck, Provost at Campus EDU. Welcome, Ken. It's so great to have you on the podcast today.
Great to be here.
And, as I already said it in the intro, which you haven't heard yet, but I always like to say you were my Hebrew teacher. That was fun. 1992.
That's one of those where I may have been standing in front of the class, but by the end of the class, Brian knew way more than I did about Hebrew. So that was, he was a self-taught person.
Well, it was really fun, though, as I've always admired you, because you were like the person that was ahead of me at what I wanted to do next, and you were the teaching fellow, and so I got to be a teaching fellow, I guess, 1 or 2 years after you moved along, and then you became a professor, and I've been able to become a professor, and we've stayed in touch on and off now, since 1992, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So for folks that don't know you, you've had a variety of jobs at professor. You've been an academic administrator. Now you're working for Campus EDU. You've been a lifelong Wesleyan. Can you just share a little bit about maybe some key points in your faith journey that's led you to this point now where you're the provost at Campus EDU?
Yeah, sure. So I started off as a chemistry major at Southern Wesleyan University. Felt a call to ministry, finished up there, and didn't feel mature enough to pastor. So I did what everybody else did. I went to Asbury Seminary, the place to be, right? And so did my MDiv there. Was blessed to be a teaching fellow. Those were real high points of my life. Great memories.
Yes.
Then went on to do a doctorate in New Testament. And then did a year substitute teaching without a job, which, everybody's glad to take your money to give you a degree, but then when you want to have a job, but anyway, Indiana Wesleyan University, I was very grateful that they hired me. I had a kind of a fleece, if you all know, I know Brian knows what that is, but basically, if I became teaching fellow, I would go on and get my doctorate. If I didn't become teaching fellow, I would take a church and And so whether it was God or I don't know that God micromanages every detail of our life, but I was very grateful to become a teaching fellow, and then ended up teaching New Testament and philosophy at Indiana Wesleyan. Then in the late like 2006, 7, 8, Indiana Wesleyan decided to start a seminary, and I was asked to be the kind of the founding dean of Wesley Seminary, and I think that's kind of where the catnip of innovation. I kind of got a little bit hooked on innovation there. So we built a seminary, which was, who gets to build a seminary? That was fun.
Yeah.
And I was dean there for 6 years. And then, I felt like the children, meaning the faculty, they were all grown up, and it was time for the founding dean to go back to teaching and let the children run the show. So I went back to the undergraduate school, and then ended up dean again there for 3 years. And that kind of leadership role eventually led me to Houghton University now, where I was a vice president for innovation over their online program, trying to find some new student populations. Did that for 2 years. And then I jumped into Campus EDU, where I'm currently the provost, which it always seems to me a little funny for an ed tech company to have a provost. But basically, I do a lot of the engagement with colleges and universities, and the kind of the academic I's and dotting of I's and crossing of T's. But anyway, we're designing online courses. We've got a thriving dual enrollment program right now, leading to associate degree. So anyway, is that enough?
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that's what I've always enjoyed about you. And then even how long have you had your blog that you post on consistently? Yeah. You've been doing that for years, right?
Yeah, I started the blog in 2004. I'm not sure that I'm not an eat the mushroom early adopter, but I'm usually before most people know that sort of thing exists. I'm at least trying it out, like ChatGPT. I was all over that early this year, trying to figure out what this thing can do for artificial intelligence. But YouTube, I have over, what is it? Man, I don't remember. But anyway, I've got over 10,000 followers, which is nothing for YouTube, but I'm proud to have that many. But so I tend to try out these things, as you do. You're an entrepreneur of a kindred spirit, I would say.
So where do you think for you, where did that sense of wanting of being a dabbler, and I'm saying that in the best sense of the word, because you've done legit stuff, but you've experimented with some things. You've not just been an academic, you've done leadership. Now you're really with a startup tech company that's trying to literally save Christian education at some level, right? And make sure it has a future. So like, where does that entrepreneurial spirit come from for you, and how have you been able to leverage that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the book. I know you're going to ask me books that this wasn't one of them. Okay. But I was reading, what was that book? That kind of, if you look at the general population, I forget which book it is, but like, I'm going to make up a number. 70% of the population tends to be protective of the status quo. And that makes sense, right? Because if you're constantly eating wild mushrooms, you're going a lot of people are going to die. And so, we can put a theological layer and say, God made it this way and it works wonderful, and maybe he did. But let's say 70% of the population tend to be, for lack of a better word, conservative. Let's go slow. Let's go to the same restaurant, eat the same thing off the menu. And then there's another, 20, 30% of the population that are they just like to try new things. And again, I'm kind of making this up, but I liked this scenario. It resonated with me. And I think that's just who I am. I'm a person who's always kind of looking for, the future. I'm not a pessimist about the future. Oh, it's going to all burn. We're doomed. That's just not my personality. And Nothing wrong with that other personality, because sometimes they're right, you know. But I think God has wired me to be a person who's one of the ones who's trying new things, you know, because someday the old things aren't going to work anymore. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but
Yeah, and I'm curious if you've root that in your Wesleyan theology, and even being part of the Wesleyan Church, which again, it's not one of these gigantic mainstream denominations, so it's had to do a lot of bootstrapping. There's church planting. I mean, it's a great denomination, but it's you have to be entrepreneurial. Is that so? Like, does that come out of just your faith tradition, and does Wesleyan theology in some way help you to be a little bit more optimistic about the future? Just love to hear how you integrate your faith with that entrepreneurial spirit.
yeah, I would definitely say that, and this again, you're getting my opinion, that the best of the Wesleyan tradition is wired that way.
Yeah.
The going back to the Wesleyan Methodists in the 1840s, who basically didn't want to sit around and wait for the church to figure out that slavery shouldn't happen, and so they said, let's go ahead and start a movement. Let's get out of these kind of status quo congregations, and let's do something. Let's help with the Underground Railroad. And even so, that was one side of the Wesleyan heritage. The other side was another group, parent group, were very entrepreneurial. They were constantly starting Bible colleges. Now, those colleges didn't always survive, but they were trying things. They were planting churches, in their front living room. They were, in Cincinnati. There's a story about the Pilgrims was the name of the group. They were forbidden to, I forget, they were forbidden to announce something about what they were doing. So they basically put it on umbrellas and, walked around with the message on the umbrella. Anyway, that's not, highly innovative today, maybe, but I do feel like it is somewhat in the optimism is part of the DNA of the best of the movement. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of for lack of a better word, curmudgeons in the Wesleyan Church. Why we've never done it that way. I think it's probably indigenous to all
it's
churches.
Universal.
Yeah, but the optimism of grace, that you don't have to lose to temptation. Oh, well, I'm going to face another temptation. I'm sure I'll lose. But a kind of an optimism that the power of the Holy Spirit you can actually do the good, that you want to do. So yeah, I definitely think that's the best of the Wesleyan theology and the Wesleyan tradition.
And let me just ask one more Wesleyan question. This isn't completely related to where we're going to go with this, but I'm just curious, as a person who's been lifelong Wesleyan, you've gone to Asbury, you've taught at some of two of the best of the Wesleyan churches, institutions. Like, what's your sense of the message of entire sanctification in the 21st century? Is that still something that we can proclaim? What's your sense of how that sounds like in our modern culture? Just curious, because I try to get a lot of Wesleyan scholars on here, and I see my ministry basically as doing of cultivating the love of God and neighbor, which to me that's what Wesley says is entire sanctification, and open ourselves up to that. And so I'm committed. That's what still gets me excited, is that. I'm just curious, how do you sense that plays in maybe the future of the church?
Yeah, well, I actually was on you would know this, District Board of Ministerial Development. I was with a group here in Indiana. Friday, actually, we were interviewing, ministerial candidates, and that, we asked that question, and there wasn't a sense of we don't believe this anymore, but let's go ahead and dot the I. What do you think about this entire? I mean, it wasn't that feel at all, and none of the candidates actually responded in any kind of a vein like that. But I felt like there was an optimism about the idea that, and this makes perfect sense, to me, that at some point in your spiritual walk, you're going to come to a point where, am I going to give everything to God, or am I not going to give everything to God? And if you choose not to get everything to God, probably your spiritual life is just going to disintegrate, and eventually you'll fall away from the faith because you've said no to God. And so the idea that you would get to a point in your spiritual walk where is your all on the altar of sacrifice laid, you give everything to the Lord, and then the Holy Spirit, it's not just a matter of us. The Holy Spirit takes the sacrifice, the Holy Spirit plugs you in, and you just move to a whole new level in your walk with the Lord, a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ, a non-Wesleyan once said. And then there'll be new things. There'll be new areas that emerge, new challenges, maybe some of the old temptations will, especially if you don't keep plugged in, the juices are running low, so you have to plug back in. And I personally like that the disciples are filled with the Holy Spirit again I think it's Acts 4, so I think this is, we kind of, in my childhood, it felt like we got obsessed with the method, the formula, you pull this chain, you turn the dial twice, you genuflect 5 times, and bam, and I think for me as a young person, the method or the process kind of took over, and I didn't really have a clear sense of what we were really talking about in terms of a fullness of love toward others, and that idea of full surrender. But I think this idea of giving everything to the Lord and letting Him work through you to the fullest, I don't see how that's old myself, but
Good.
Love to hear your thoughts on that sometime.
No, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. That could be another conversation. Just curious, do you have a favorite, metaphor? I mean, we might have heard a lot of the same stuff. Ken Oswald had all those good metaphors, and I've talked to Oswald on this podcast. So, do you have a favorite metaphor? If you were going to say, you mentioned giving it all on the altar. That's some of that old school language. But do you have like a preferred metaphor of what it looks like to actually surrender?
Well, the one that I used on Friday was the old the house metaphor. So you're in the house, but maybe there's some rooms you don't really want the Lord to go into. Well, don't go into that one, and there might be a period of okay, you can go in the attic, but not the basement, but not this closet, but that you get to a point where not only have you allowed the Lord to be in every room of the house, but you sign the title to the property over to the Lord and say, this is yours. It's your house. Do whatever you want with it. Do whatever you want in whatever room. So that's the metaphor probably that I've resonated the most with over the years.
Well, thank you very, Ken. And I'm going to do a hard turn a little bit here. So, I wanted to speak with you about several things. And right now with your job with Campus EDU, you're getting a chance to meet with a lot of leaders. You've been involved in Christian higher education and theological education now for 30 years, roughly. What's your sense of where things are? What excites you? What do you sense some of the headwinds are right now?
Well, so what I love about campus, and this is what I loved about founding Wesley Seminary. When we founded Wesley Seminary, Joel Green, who you'll know, who used to be, I think, academic dean at Asbury. I don't forget what his title was. He might have been provost, but anyway, he was a little jealous, that we could start a seminary from scratch, without all the existing turf war. No, you can't touch that. And that's what I love about campus, is that in a sense, we're trying to design, in our case, primarily online education, although we have talked to schools. We're not against, and I want to make it very clear, we are completely on board with residential education. We're not, yes. And in fact, we're in a new initiative where we're trying to fill seats in empty seats in a dorm, kind of like Priceline, where you sell these empty rooms to us, and we'll have a hybrid kind of a learning situation. So what I love about campus is that we're not encumbered by a lot of things. I was talking to a colleague of mine today about how a lot of colleges just couldn't survive without the room and board, And so most institutions are encumbered by the past, and I don't know that they're quite sure how to downsize, these kinds of entanglements with all kinds of things, bureaucracy, administrative bloat, and so the price point, the price point of higher education right now is it's just simply out too much.
Yes.
For most people to handle. And the funny thing is that it's a lot of it's a game. Well, our sticker price is 45,000, which shows that we're valuable, but you're only going to have to pay 20.
Right.
And your parents will pay taxes on the scholarship. Anyway, but so I'm optimistic because there's an old Latin expression, fate will find a way. And I don't know that I'm going to call it fate, but these things they just won't stand, in my opinion. There will be a breakthrough, whether it's campus or some other. Houghton College or university, they took a risk. We're still seeing whether it was a good move, and they said, well, let's just forget this game of we're saying we're charging this, but we're really charging this. Let's do a reset, and let's actually price tuition less than 20,000, because that's basically what it costs us. Those kinds of things, I really think they're going to have to happen, or you're just going to have crash and burn for a lot of institutions. I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think we're going to have to be more affordable for sure. We're going to have to be more accessible. Again, I am not and I want to make this very clear. I am not against residential education, not in the slightest. If I had to do it all over again, I would go residential again. So I'm not against residential, but I think it's a mistake not to have distance options of varied kinds, and those are they're not going away, in my opinion. So I don't know whether feel free to redirect if I didn't.
Yeah, let's ask it. Yeah, because this whole conversation, it isn't about. Everybody. Most people, if they could afford it, I think, would do in residence, move somewhere and have a chance to be at the library, live with your professors, have that experience. Now, the modern world with the technology opens up the possibility that you don't have to do that. And my sense of what campus is doing is you've been around, you've taught a lot of schools. I've taught online. My kids have gone to different universities. I've seen what their online things are. And for most places online, even to be kind is a massive downgrade from the same class that you would have face to face. Instead of having the professor lecture, just read this book and talk amongst yourselves. And then students go like, why am I paying for this class? I could have bought the book and read it by myself, and it would have saved me like $3,000 or something like that. So what do you see as what a cutting edge future is for, again, this isn't on campus things, but what's the possibilities if a school would really go all in with technology to make virtual education powerful? I'm a contrarian, and I'm a dabbler, and so I even say this at Asbury. It's like my contrarian bet is this: you can do spiritual formation and education better at a distance than you can in person. And so I'm willing to experiment to see if I could make that, if that could really be true, and that may be even beyond where you are, but that's kind of my bias, just because I teach in those modalities. Now it's all hybrids, all online. So I'm like, okay, I need to make this an even better experience for my students than if they could literally come and have me for class 3 times a week. So I'm just curious, what kind of future would that look like? What would it take to get a school to have that kind of a robust presence so that they can extend the best of their in-person self to people that are never going to be able to live in person? So that's a long question, but I'm just curious how you would respond to that.
Yeah, I definitely believe that you can do spiritual formation at a distance, especially, for example, um, the spiritual formation doesn't have to be with you as the professor. Even you can have them have a very intentional connection with somebody in their context where they are meeting face to face, with someone regularly. I mean, in general, uh, there is an intentionality to online courses that I can tell you as a face-to-face teacher for many, many, many years. uh, my face-to-face classes often did not have anything close to the level of intentionality that my online classes did, because the online class had to be planned in advance, and
Yes.
it had to be laid out. And a lot of times those who were guiding you through that process were hyper sensitive to rubrics and that sort of thing, maybe even too much. So, but uh, there were a lot of times where, and I shouldn't say this, maybe, I knew the general topic, it's on the syllabus, I go in, press play, and wing it, so to speak, in a face-to-face class. And I mean, I don't think that used to be horrible. It might be now, but so I don't think I'm saying anything new when I say that online classes are often far more intentional in terms of the learning outcomes than face to face. But part of the origin story of campus was that my boss, Darren Campbell, who founded campus, his two sons took online classes with the kind of the institution for Christian high school online. I won't tell you the name of the place, but anyway, it's over 100,000 online students. So this is not some hack of an institution, and he thought it was horrible. I mean, he just thought the classes were horrible. Type, 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 type. And so he had this vision for something that's more engaging. And so if you look at one of our courses, it's more like Netflix. They have trailers, so you can note with music. I'm teaching philosophy right now with campus, and I was a little taken aback when the student said, the thing I love best is the music that goes with the videos. And I'm like, well,
That's hilarious.
what about the content of the videos? What about me? And but so music, videos, well produced, very well produced. We did an art course where they went to Italy for 10 days. So maybe we can send you to Israel with a camera crew.
It's not right now, right?
Yeah, we might wait a year or two. But so the and I also say you don't have to take a course to take a course. So when you're on most of these learning platforms, you have to take an orientation course so you can figure out where is all this stuff. But this is more like Apple, or at least we intend it to be. Point, click, you're in. So we're obviously in the early stages. I think assignments will need to be more and more interactive, and so we try to. I was just seeing a prototype for a new assignment that basically as you enter different numbers, the chart manipulates. So I think there needs to be more and more interactivity, variety of assignment. Hitting all the learning outcomes or learning styles. I mean, so there are possibilities that are beyond our things we used to imagine. So we used to think, well, you could never do a lab science online. Well, Arizona State's doing it. Portage Geneva in Pennsylvania is doing it. They either mail you the lab materials, or they have virtual labs where you can dissect something, on your screen. I'm not 100% sold on that, but just the possibilities. Some of it's a failure of imagination.
Yeah, it's good.
There's just so much more that could be done than we probably have imagined yet. And AI is making it, even crazier.
And I want to shift to AI for a few minutes because we're going to run out of time. I'm just curious, On that last piece, you mentioned the importance of imagination. What has helped you? I mean, it's not just you. There's other. You have a. But what helps you to stay imaginative? Because now let's just talk. You speak to pastors and educators that are probably listening to this. So, like, what would you recommend if you're like, okay, I need to be more imaginative. I need to try some different things. Like, where would you send them to experience it? Maybe they need to check out the campus website. But like, what would be some tips to or resources that could potentially help them to leverage their imagination in a new way?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. I mean, again, I consider myself a second tier. I'm not a mushroom eater, but I'm early to the
Early
table,
adopter, right? Yeah.
and a lot of that's just because I hang around the people who are. I mean, some of the people I work with, they're like, "Have you seen this?" And I feel, no, I haven't. How do you come up with this? So even if you're not the kind of person that naturally finds these things, hang out with the people that do. You'll know the name Bill Patrick, who was a teaching fellow at Asbury and taught there at the Asbury Orlando campus for a long time. He always knew every new book that came out. I don't know how he did it, and like, how did you know that? So you don't have to be the person that comes up with everything. You just have to know the people that know these things. And so, like, take artificial intelligence. There are a number of Twitter feeds that I'm just subscribed to it, and so every week, there's a whole new list of. It's overwhelming, frankly. Here's all the new AI tools that have come out, this week. Here's all the new stuff you can do, and there'll be some sifting. Some of it'll last, and some of it won't. Things will emerge as the better, but you don't have to be the one that discovers it first. You just have to know the people that are who somehow they know these things, and it could be as simple as following them on Twitter or being friends with them on Facebook and Instagram. So I mean, that's kind of know the people who somehow know these things, I guess, would be my advice. They're out there, and they're broadcasting. Just tune into the station.
Yeah. So in other words, like whatever your expertise is, be curious enough to listen to podcasts, Twitter feeds of things that are just literally on technology, so you can see what's going on there, and then ask, how might this fit into what I'm doing? So talk about AI a little bit. I understand, and again, our mutual friend talked about that you even been able to do some writing with AI. So, like, what should a pastor or even a professor know about AI, and how can it enhance our work? Like, I'd want it to, can it grade my papers for me, Ken? That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
But
so I think,
just kidding, current students, of course, but
well, I mean, so let's go ahead and the elephant in the room, integrity. You need to have integrity about it. Don't lie. Don't. I was teaching a class last night, and I said, now don't use ChatGPT to write your papers. And I thought there'd be a ha ha ha, but it was just stone cold silence. Anyway, I'm like, wait a minute, are you all planning on using ChatGPT? But anyway, so I think there's integrity there, and of course, just with I've mentioned ChatGPT a few times. You need to be aware that sometimes it just makes stuff up. It's amazing what it's doing. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed now when you're typing something, the shadow words will appear. It's kind of like, I don't know, nine out of 10 people who write these words write this word next. And that's kind of what these AI things are doing. They're not thinking, they're just kind of saying what probably a person would say next. And so sometimes they make stuff up. I mean, if you use ChatGPT, you totally have to double check the things that it tells you, especially if you were to ask it, what's a good TED talk on this? It's probably going to make up something that doesn't exist. So let the buyer beware. In fact, I heard a story about a lawyer that was presenting an argument, and as a defense, put some cases from the past that turned out to not exist because they'd used artificial intelligence. So anyway, it absolutely must be checked. I think of it as an accelerator, and a way around a mental block. Maybe even, maybe you're having trouble thinking of how do I start this? How do I I don't know where to go from here. It stimulates. It's kind of like a steroid for your brain. It's not going to replace you. And I've asked it biblical stuff. And again, this may be a little hubris on my part, but a lot of times I'll say, man, just don't talk. Let me write this, because you're not doing very well here. So it's not, especially the deeper you go into a subject. You as an Old Testament specialist, me, I think I'm a New Testament specialist. We just know more than it knows. So it's not going to replace, but it might take you to the next level. So if I'm a mediocre writer, it might just be able to make you a pretty good writer, I think. I had this idea. I thought I'm going to write a book using ChatGPT, a pastor's brief guide to business. And so I spent probably 2-3 weeks just feeding it questions. What are the topics you would cover in business if you were to write a book for pastors? And XYZ. Okay, marketing. If you were to write a chapter on marketing for pastors, what would what topics would you cover? Blah blah blah. Okay, write 1,000 words on how to do a market study. Blah blah blah. And I did that. I edited it. I self-published it. And I put on the top. You can see on the front page it says Ken Schenck and ChatGPT. But the interesting thing is that people aren't, from what I can tell, people aren't interested in a book written by ChatGPT right now. That book, if I'd have just said A Pastor's Brief Guide to Business by Ken Schenck, it probably would have sold at least one copy. As far as I know, not one person has bought the ChatGPT version of it. So I don't know if I'm getting at some of the things you wanted to hear from me, but I've dabbled a lot with it. It's fun. I asked it to write Genesis 1 for a 5-year-old, and it was fun. Who knows? Maybe I'll publish the AI standard version or something, but nobody would probably buy it.
No, that's good. I was just kind of curious because I've experimented with Chat GPT, especially with like I have a YouTube channel too. You're 5 times bigger than me, so you're like a giant to me. I'd love to have the 10,000 thing there, but what I found that it does a pretty good job at is if I take the transcript off of a YouTube video, and I've practiced to really get the prompt, so I can't riff the prompt, but I've got it really precise. But I'm basically having it rewrite the transcripts, and I say something like, this is my video, use my words, and rewrite this into a coherent essay. And it does a pretty nice job. So I can get some show notes. And I'm imagining this would help me if I have a lecture that I've kind of, we don't wing stuff. It's more just stand up and deliver the goods that you have in your brain. That's what a PhD lets you do. You can just talk, you push a button and it just comes out for hours. Right. And so I'm imagining being able to capture my in classroom actual persona that would be recorded, and then Chat GPT can actually create notes that I could never create on my own because I don't write like I talk per se. And so that's got me excited and this would help students then potentially they can get notes off the videos, the actual lecture notes. So and I've been wondering, can Chat GPT take all the notes I have for a class, do the same kind of thing? Can this be organized into some kind of a coherent manuscript? So that's and to me, at that point, I see that more as an editorial assistant, or as it's not even a ghostwriter because it'd be my own stuff, but it's an assistant that gives you an iteration that then you can draft on. That's what's kind of gotten me excited right now. And that's how I've been able to use it so far.
I know there are plugins now. I think maybe I'm not thinking of it offhand, but where you can upload a whole document into it. ChatGPT, I don't think you can do a whole document with ChatGPT yet.
Maybe the paid version, they have all those apps that are inside the paid version of it. I don't know if you've seen that.
There might be a plugin. Yeah, I mean, I use the paid version. I'm trying to remember what it is, but anyway, of course, there are a number of options. Everybody has a AI now. Like you were saying, we're on Zoom. There's an AI companion, here that would take notes on our conversation if we wanted it to. So it's just everywhere. It's kind of mind blowing to me. I mean, I felt like I wish there were only 5 AI things that I could, that I could look at, but it's just so many different places. But yeah, I mean, like you can have it, you can have it generate a quiz. You can say, here's 5 pages worth of material, generate a 10-question objective quiz with multiple choice and give me the answers. I mean, it can do all kinds of things. You can say, okay, summarize this, like you said, give me a 1-paragraph description of this material. Those are all things that it'll do. Yeah.
Good. I got to watch the clock here for you because I promised that we'd be finished up. So let me just ask a couple final questions, and then maybe we can have another conversation at some point. I'm going to go to the hard one that I really asked that I love to do this at the end. I'm just curious, out of your long life, and you've read so many books, if you were going to just pick the 2 or 3 books that have really influenced you the most deeply, and that could be spiritually or professionally, what would, other than the Bible, of course, what would those books be, Ken?
Yeah, man, that's such a hard question.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I kind of have a list of go-to books.
Just give us a few of them. Then yeah.
I don't know that they changed my life. I mean, maybe it's just because of my area. But when I read that, I think this morning, I mean, the first thing that popped into my mind was N.T. Wright's "Surprised by Hope." But I mean, I don't know if that changed my life. But Joel Green's Recovering the Scandal of the Cross, Seized by Truth. I mean, those were the things that popped into my head.
Okay.
We've been, Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind was pretty stimulating to me. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I've read that one.
Where he basically talked about us having different moral taste buds. I mean, there's any number of books. They pop out whenever I'm writing something, and they, they're in my footnotes and bibliographies. But none of those seem as life-changing as what the question would merit. So I apologize. I'm obviously a hack. So
no, I mean, I never know what I'm going to, that's why I asked the questions. There's no right answer on these things. So obviously if it's going to be any book, it's going to be the Bible probably for you.
Sure.
Yeah, but these other, I mean, Joel Green, N.T. Wright, Jonathan Haidt, those are fine people there. And I've at least met one of them in person, Joel. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So
N.T. Wright has a new Romans book, but I don't know whether it'll change my life yet.
So. No, that's true. Yeah. Where can people find out more about you? Talk about like where campus is, your own personal website, if they want to find out a little bit more about Ken. And also I'll put links to some of your books on Amazon here too.
Sure. Well, campusedu.com, I think, would be our base site, but there are all kinds of sub sites. Got a dual enrollment site, campusedu.com/ dual enrollment would be curious. I mean, if you really want to see what we're doing right now, that might be one where you can actually see trailers with videos and get a little bit of sense of how we're trying to make education a little bit more like Netflix or Amazon Prime. I have a blog, it's kenshenck.blogspot.com. If you do a search on YouTube, you'll probably find me. So yeah, I'm constantly generating stuff. Some of it's good, some of it probably isn't.
No, well, that's what I love. That's what I love about you. And I'll have to get you on and talk to some more about just productivity, because I mean, I've been, we've known each other for a long time, but mostly it's been from distance. And I've just always admired how much you're able to produce, and also how you've been able to be involved in different interesting. You're expert on Hebrews. But then you publish videos on philosophy, even science. So it's like you have just all these interests and you put it all together and you participate in the leadership and education of the future. So I appreciate you and admire you for following your calling and, ultimately serving God's people in all the different ways that you had. So again, it's great to be your friend, and thanks for being my guest today.
Thank you. And likewise with you.
And thanks everyone for listening all the way to the end of this week's episode. Until next time, live by faith, be known by love, and be a voice of hope to others.